On this month's edition of The Inside Job, I interviewed Jim Darragh. As CEO, Jim has led 5 tech businesses to exit. He's worked at BMC and SAP, but much of his success over the last 15 years has been with scale-ups, selling to the likes of Riverbed, Infovista, Inflection, and others. He now chairs a number of investor-backed high-growth B2B tech firms. I first got to know Jim back in 2021. When he was CEO of Totalmobile. We ran a successful search for Jim right in the thick of COVID. He's a brilliant person to work with. He's been a great support to Herringbone. I think this will be an interesting interview.
How did you get into what you do, Jim? Was it sort of fate or by design?
And I was interested to use the word fate, actually, because there is a fate component. So I came out of university in the kind of early mid-90s, believe it or not. And IT sales was not a massive thing, really. It wasn't something I think I'd been made aware of whilst at university. So I'd kind of did the milk round coming out of university. I'd studied a very generic management economics kind of degree. The milk round hadn't really worked for me. One thing that did work for me, though, I was quite a handy rugby player. I'd done all the kind of England schoolboys and age group stuff. And that was my fate moment. Literally a tap on a shoulder after a game where I probably played quite well. And some guy came up in a bar, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I've just left uni." And he kind of went, "Right, I've got an IT company. Can you come down on to London on Monday and meet with us and have a chat?" And I kind of hadn't really figured out in my own head, but it was clearly, you're coming to play for my club now.
Was that Richmond?
It was, yeah. He didn't own Richmond or anything, but he was one of the kind of committee guys there or something. And he had an IT hardware business. And he had this really interesting mentality, actually, which has played back to me over the years a bit, which was, I'll hire rugby players. Rugby players are social creatures. They're team players. Therefore, if I hire a room full of rugby players, my propensity to have successful people who can go on the phone and sell stuff is probably higher. And I think at some level that was probably right. Now, he didn't layer on the fact that they're all going to try and kill each other all day long, but it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton of stuff. We trained every lunchtime at work, bizarrely, because we had a sevens team. But it was my grounding. It was my entry into IT. And if you ever had a sliding door moment, I can still picture that tap on the shoulder and the conversation I had with this chap. Yes. I did go down Monday. I left with a job. So that was kind of, at some level, the making of me. I think it snowballed a bit for me. I enjoyed the sales side of it. I learned a lot. I built a pretty good foundation of working hard and doing all that kind of stuff. By the turn of the kind of millennium, I was probably into larger organizations at that point, and my personal development and training and my own career began to, I guess, blossom from that point, with learning at each stage and developing at each stage. It was really a great time to be in the industry, I think.
If you think of the best salespeople you've worked with, and I'm sure you were probably a very good salesperson yourself, what do you think made them successful? If there was one thing, I know that's quite difficult. Maybe there's one or two different things, but
I've worked with a lot of better salespeople than I ever was, that's for sure. And you recognize it, I think, when you see somebody in action. And you're right, there are quite a few ingredients that go into those that really stand apart. The A player, if I were to boil it down, they're coachable and they never stop being coachable. So they're always open to new ideas, learning new things, trying different things. I absolutely believe, and might even be obvious, but not always, that a level of intelligence usually plays out in terms of how successful that person can be. And then there are characteristics around being disciplined, being very competitive. And I think if you boil down those people who elevate themselves to the top of the league chart, many of them will have those characteristics and those traits. I've never worked out for the life of me, and maybe things have changed, but I've never ever worked out how, the art of enterprise sales is not a widely touted degree at university. I mean, there's so much to it, to good salespeople. And I've seen good leaders who develop good salespeople. There's so much to it. I cannot fathom how there isn't a lot more noise around university qualifications or more formal qualifications where people can actually learn to do that stuff. It's a bit of an anomaly for me in terms of all of the realm of things that you can go to university to study, how is this not more prominent?
Yeah, actually, I was talking to a chair of a business this morning, and he said some of the most valuable people I've recruited in my career, it wasn't an interview for the newsletter, it was just a call, but he said some of the most valuable people I've recruited in my career were these kind of mid-level salespeople that just came on, at a particular stage in their career and were just exceptionally talented and exceptionally successful. And he also said he was happy to pay the money he needed to pay to get these people on board because they were just so valuable to companies. Yeah, I wonder why that is. Yeah.
There's another interesting thing there is that are there, I wouldn't say triggers, but are there clues in people's backstory? And I'm trying not to overlay my own backstory on this, but people who've been involved in high-level competitive sport, who've excelled at something, who've put themselves out, who've trained really hard, who have developed themselves and have those kind of backstories, I think are good clues, right? If somebody walks in and goes, I was part of the GB Olympic rowing 8, you kind of go, okay, this guy's really put himself out there.
Successful, right? It's like another level of discipline and consistency and just constantly just doing the right things, which I think that's just a lot of sales, right?
Yeah. And I'm often, when I talk to those people, are really successful salespeople, and start digging a bit, you'll find some of this stuff in there, that they have endured hardship, put themselves out there, excelled at something in their background, and then they've moved on in their life and they've had to find the next thing.
Absolutely. I think kind of demystifying what makes a salesperson is something that we've done a lot of, because we've also recruited a lot of salespeople, but it can be quite tricky to figure out. Do you have any particular career highlights that stand out, or events that you particularly enjoyed, and why?
Yeah. Working for some of those large US entities or global entities selling enterprise software back in the day, there was certainly some things that happened in those organizations where you progressed a lot and learned a lot very quickly. I think at McAfee back in the early noughties, I got my career really gathered pace. So I got a lot of opportunities to do bigger, better in quite quick succession. That was a great learning opportunity for me, and working with some great leaders to absorb some of the goodness from there. I think when I went to BMC Software, it's been a school for very many go-to-market best practice kind of tools that you were loaded with. And you learn a lot. The company was acquiring a lot of businesses. We absorbed a lot of other good practices from other places. And you certainly got to see and try out some of those things. That was a great learning opportunity. And then suddenly, an opportunity to be a chief exec in a VC private equity owned business, you have to step up again, right? So suddenly now the comfort blanket of a large organization is gone, and now you're kind of it. Everyone's looking at you and go, well, what do we do? Sometimes there's no better learning than being thrown in at the deep end. That was a little bit like that, but managed to boil it back to all of the things I'd learned, and all of the good tools, tricks, methods that I'd learned at the big corporate entities suddenly came to the fore, and I was able to actually take those and do something with them. I will kind of flip it slightly. Sorry, and that 7.5 years running Totalmobile was a brilliant time. Not always brilliant, right? We had to do some really tough stuff in the early days. You learn from doing the things that are a little bit harder, and cost rationalization and some tough decisions in those early days to put it into a place where it could grow. But once it started to motor, and the team around you are the people you selected and you really value and you enjoy working with them, that became a brilliant period of working life. There's one got you in there, which is you also learn from the things that are either hard or wrong, and along the way you make mistakes, and you hope that clearly when you're in the middle of making a mistake, you're not going, well, this is a brilliant learning opportunity. You're kind of scrambling to do something else. But there were those along the way. You did things that didn't work, or you went to places that were just too difficult to do something about. And what I learned in those periods, I guess, is what are the things you need to do, and also what are the things that I know how to do. I can't fix products, right? That's not my thing.
Have you tried?
I think I got in a position where I had to try once, and learned that probably that wasn't, I'm not an inventor. I'm not really a product guy. I am firmly a chief exec with a go-to-market hat on. Don't get me wrong. As you're a chief exec, you learn a lot of different skills and a lot of different trades. So yeah, I'm, financially pretty fluent. I understand how product works, I understand how R&D works and so on. But sit me in a room and ask me to actually reinvent the technology, unless I'm surrounded by the right people, I'm all at sea. But building great teams with brilliant people who you can absolutely trust to do the right thing, follow the strategy and deliver, put it together, and working with some fantastically talented go-to-market people over the years, you absolutely work out how you make that work as well. And I think recent experience of being a non-exec and seeing a lot of different businesses, whether I work in them or play a role in helping them build for their own future, you do see common things and you do question, are the right people here? Have you got the go-to-market right? And have you got the right people in that organization as well? So you do see reoccurring themes, and usually it comes back to, do you have the right people at the table to deliver the strategy? Is the strategy right? And is the execution of this from a go-to-market perspective going to deliver you growth? Because if you can't get those three things right, life's tough.
Yeah, and that's clearly a lot of achievements are about the people around you. And I think that's not everyone, but I do think a lot of good leaders, get a lot of joy out of working with great people and achieving things with other people. If you think of the most challenging part of your job, what do you think that is? Whether it's, so you're in a portfolio career, non-exec, chair roles. So whether there's a theme around, well, actually, first could be you and your capacity. What is a challenge for you? Or what is the most challenging parts of being a portfolio non-exec? Or it could be, within the portfolio companies, what are the most challenging parts? Whichever way you want to answer it.
Sure. I think being a portfolio non-exec, I'm enjoying it greatly. It's very different to being a chief exec, extremely different. Demand on time, the kind of peaks and troughs of activity that go on over time. But I think when it comes to challenges, variety is a bit of a challenge. You go from being single-threaded, this is all I do, I'm incredibly focused as a chief exec on this one organization and everything within it, to, now you see 4 or 5 different organizations on 4 or 5 different days. You're constantly kind of flipping right, what are the challenges of this organization? And so that's a bit of a challenge, I guess. Lots of constituent parties to deal with, different PE companies or investors that operate slightly differently, sometimes founders who are still involved, management teams, so a huge variety of different people. The best phrase as well I've heard to capture the life of a non-exec and how to keep yourself on the right side of things is this phrase, heads in, hands out. And I constantly remind myself, coming from fairly recently, a couple of years ago, from an operator background, constantly remind myself, I'm not here to do it. I'm here to help people arrive at the right decisions for themselves, offer experience where I can, but not interfere and not push my own views too hard. So absolutely be available and consultative and so on, but not hands in. That is something I am quite precious about and keep reminding myself about. In terms of the organizations, I think I'll go back to that. There's 3 things that I tend to gravitate towards in organizations and then help them assess where they're at. And the first is, because we had this conversation, you and I, 4 or 5 years, a couple of years ago. And the first one is about that strategy and your level of differentiation. What do you do as an organization to consciously differentiate that enables you to win more? And that's quite a tough question to ask people. It is then how does that strategy, the conscious differentiation, by the way, there's a podcast, I'm not advertising it, but it was my lights on moment, an author and podcaster called Patrick Lencioni called Making Strategy Simple. And that was kind of listening to that for the first time was okay, we don't do enough of this. We need to tune our own story. And then actually we picked on 2 or 3 strategic pillars that became the strength of Totalmobile, and that ultimately helped us align structure, hire, market, design product, even M&A, all eventually aligned to those objectives, and that made us much stronger as a differentiated organization, and everyone in the business knew what it was. Anyway, that's my start point. And do you have the right people to execute that in every discipline in the business? And sometimes they don't. Sometimes organizations I look at don't have the right skills, experience, around the table. Finding and how do you turn that into a really effective go-to-market machine, and what are the components that build that up? And that's multi-layered, right? In terms of how do you turn that differentiation into a proposition, who's your ICP and who you're going after, how do you do it, who's doing it, etc. All of those bits. But those 3 things, the strategy and strategic differentiation, the people to deliver it, and the go-to-market engine that can execute and enable the growth of the business. If you can get those 3 right, you're well on the way.
And what if a business is relatively successful but doesn't have a strategic differentiator? Are you suggesting that they work very hard to create and find one? Otherwise, life in business is going to be more and more difficult. Like, what would be your advice to a business in that situation where there's because this is something that we work through with you.
It was almost accidental, right? The conversation we had.
Yeah. And I'll put the link to that podcast, the Patrick Lencioni,
Right.
Lencioni one as well. But
Let me say this. If you are growing, you probably have a strategic differentiation. You just haven't written it down, right? You
Yes.
just have not kind of narrowed it in and began to consciously think about it.
Yes.
I consciously use that word conscious, the things you consciously do to differentiate. If you haven't got one and you're just out there kind of firing a shotgun in the air and hoping something drops out, I begin to question, how sustainable is that? How inefficient is this? How does it reflect in your conversion of pipeline, your conversion of funnel? How does it reflect in the amount of money you're expending on marketing, salespeople, and so on versus the returns you're getting? You also begin to question, how sustainable is that in the medium and long term? If you don't actually have a thing that you keep in a box and everyone in the business knows about it, right? That is
Yes.
your thing. You can create them. I think Totalmobile, we probably, I mean, I literally went and looked at where were we winning, what was happening. What did that mean in terms of how do we do more of that? How do we distill that into something that we can repeat, becomes our strength? And it actually, you know, a couple of those were quite easy to define. There was a vertical market component to it, and there was a breadth of integrated technologies, the number of connected technologies all driving to the same ultimate efficiency goal for a customer. You know, those are a couple. And I think the third one, we probably went, well, we're going to build this one. We're going to make this one. And that was all around how we engage with customers and the level of depth we would go to across the full curriculum, really, of find a customer, sell to a customer, service a customer, support a customer. We kind of looked at the whole thing and went, what would make this better than anyone else? That they judge their engagement with other organizations by a standard that we set, which is higher. You know, I think you can create some. I think you've got to hope that you can define them fairly quick.
A lot of our audience are at different points in their career. A few of them are thinking about what's next. They might be CROs or CEOs. They're often thinking, how to become a non-exec. And we had this conversation a couple of years ago. But related to what you've just said, when you are meeting businesses and having to sort of make that decision, obviously the businesses have to make the decision around you. But what are you looking for in that business that it will get you excited, that excites you?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm not here ever for a free ride. So I'm hoping that somewhere in the experiences I've got, I can help add value, whether it be in the go-to-market, whether it be building great teams, whether it be tuning messages and strategies and so on. So something there that says, this organization, I'm looking at it and they're kind of going, okay, so they've got a flow of customers, they're winning. Clearly they have a product that has a market right to win. Okay, that's all great. Now, how do we tune that so that it wins more, is more efficient in its output, can grow even faster? So I'm looking for the raw materials of product to market fit. Okay, if that's there, good. I'm looking for proof points around customers that are referenceable and repeatable. Okay, well, that would be fantastic. And then I'm looking, okay, how do I help this organization tune that engine, right? Because they have something there already. And if you think about the stage, Ryan, that I kind of come into businesses, it's usually they are 10, somewhere around that number of recurring revenue, and they want to be 50, which is what I've done. It's what I did as the chief exec. So that's where I think I can probably add more value to operations in terms of, okay, how are they going to navigate that growth journey? How quickly can they get there? What are the elements that will accelerate it? Then I can help them build those ingredients into their plan and develop from that point. I'm looking for, they have the proof that they have something. It's the, how do you accelerate that to the next point along the journey?
If you think of the best or some of the best revenue leaders that you've worked with, why or what do you think has made them successful?
And I've been lucky that I've worked with some really good ones, actually. A couple in particular stand out. They had, and I tried to condense this into the things they both did. I think they hired really well, and they were absolutely maniacal about hiring, disproportionately in my head. Right, the time they spent sourcing the right candidates and hiring process they went through to really know what they were looking for and define what that A player looks like and go and get them. And by the way, anyone who says, I don't think we can hire A players, I don't get. I'm not subscribing to that story. You can. You have to do the right things. You have to present yourself in the right way. You have to sell what you're doing. Absolutely everyone has that opportunity to go and hire really, really good A-player salespeople. Both of the people I'm thinking of who have been wildly successful in their own careers then spent probably, again, a disproportionate amount of time developing those people once in the organization. Everything from onboarding to very structured enablement for people that would kind of constantly build on the skills that these people had to enable them to be more successful in their own careers. Set clear standards and goals. This is what good looks like. This is how we're going to measure you. This is why you should do that. If you do that, your chances of success increase massively. Interestingly, and I think a much neglected part, unfortunately, of sales, because nobody loves it, is they prioritize pipeline and everything around it.
Yeah.
Right. From who are your target list and how are you going after them, and what does your pipeline plan look like? Who else are you using to help you get there, and how are you executing against that plan, and which products are you trying to? The whole continuum of pipeline. I mean, I'd love to know what proportion that makes up of somebody, of an individual salesperson's success, but these sales leaders in particular pushed it right to the top of the list. It was incredibly visible, and it was an incredibly focused part of the job of the salespeople, and something that those sales leaders drove. And I think finally they had, although I think there's probably a supporting factor, they had really good process and metrics, around all of this. And when I say process, I mean, sales stages and real qualification and so on. And I think if you put those things in a bucket, so hire well, put a lot of effort into developing people, prioritize pipeline, and have strong process. Beyond those things, those people delivered brilliant success in the organizations I worked at, allowed us to scale, continually be hiring, continually bring in new skills and new people into the organization, and at the same time delivering great efficiency of the expense that we're putting into it. So it was honesty. I sat back and watched this with great admiration for what they were doing, but it made my life a lot easier.
The 3 Ps: people, pipeline, process. And I like that as well. It's disproportionate amount of time, in terms of the pipeline and the people specifically.
I mean, to the extent of, I looked at it and went, even sometimes you go, but we haven't got any open jobs. And you go, no, we're always hiring. We're always looking for the right people. You don't just show up one day and go, well, we need a new salesperson. Or they were always even pipelining people, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a different type of pipeline, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think of the essential activities for a B2B business in a challenging market? So what should they be prioritizing?
In a challenging market, things are tighter, right? That's the natural conclusion you have to come to. Investment is tighter. Growth is harder to come by. So your execution has to be better. Guess what? Look within the things you can control. And I think the things you can control are everyone in the organization aligned to that strategy. By the way, the strategy I defined was 1 page. I took it to every town hall meeting we ever did in the company. And it was the first slide of every town hall meeting. And I was unrelenting about it. I didn't apologize for it, right? I said, you've seen this before. There's nothing more important than all of you understand the strategy and your role in it. Right? Yeah. So what was I really trying to achieve? Yeah, it was good that everyone could recite it, but it was better that everyone felt connected to it and they could see their own role within it. And therefore, ultimate alignment in an organization, everyone pulling in the same direction. Go back to a sporting analogy. It's a bit like, the rugby team, right? Where everything clicks and everyone makes their tackles and everyone follows the ball when there's a line break and all those kind of things. That I think I only played in one almost perfect game, right? Where everything went really well. And you come off and you sit in the changing room all sweaty and muddy and stuff, and you kind of go, that worked quite well. It's a bit like the same. Everything you execute goes really well, but that's about alignment. That's everyone knowing their job.
Yes.
And when challenge hits, everyone knowing their job and everyone having awareness of what everyone else is doing is really, really important. So, and there your management team come into play because they are all operating in conjunction with each other, but all pulling in the same direction. So that's really important. But yes, you're right. When you come down to the go-to-market piece, is your pipeline sustainable? Is it something that you can look forward and be predictable about converting? And I think if you can, and you have enough pipeline, and you've spent all of the time and effort building that pipeline, your nervousness subsides a bit. You can see it's been growing, and you can look at a bit down track and go, do you know what? We've got, pick a number, 10 million of pipeline next quarter. Yeah. Our standard is we're going to convert somewhere between 25 and 30% of it. So actually we've got enough pipeline. So we keep building that pipeline, and that gives us sustainability going forward, right? Those are the things that make all of the difference and actually somewhat insulate you from the challenge that the market throws at you, because you go, look, we're good. We're in good shape. We've got the plan. We know where we operate. We know the customers we're trying to sell to. We have a pipeline that aligns to that customer set. We know what we're selling. We will be fine.
A good friend of mine who is also an ex-professional cricketer, then a very good salesperson and now a very good sales leader. But he once said to me, action cures fear. If you're worried about what's going on, numbers, sales. It's just like action cures fear, and it really does. It's amazing how a good day or a good couple of weeks just working on that can get an individual into a good place, let alone a business. So last couple of quick fire questions, Jim. What's your favorite book?
It's a book called, can you see that? Execution. Probably back to front. The Discipline of Getting Things Done by Larry Bosti and Ram Charan. It's got bits of paper in it from me. I didn't even realize, of scribbles, and pages are falling out and so on. So look, that's something probably quite dear to my heart, is that execution piece. How do we get it done? So that's a well used book there, and one I would recommend.
And favorite quote?
So I'm a bit of a sucker for, I never realized quite how many quotes this guy's done, but again, a sporting one, which is Vince Lombardi, who was an American football coach, probably the most renowned one. Actually, I was operating in the 1960s. So I printed that one off. It's winning is not a sometime thing. It's an all of the time thing. You don't do things right once in a while, you do them right all the time. I think that kind of competitive winning nature, and I'm always a believer that winning breeds winning. And if you want to have fun in a business, start winning.
Yeah.
Has always been something that I've kind of carried through. It's probably why I wasn't a great coach of the Basingstoke under-6 rugby team. But if you want to have fun in a business, if you want to have fun in a team, winning is a great start point, I will say. That phrase kind of stuck with me, concentrate on doing the right things all the time.
Last question. If there's one sort of character trait quality that you look for in every hire, what would that be?
So I'll give you another quote and then it'll answer the question, right? And that is don't be the smartest guy in the room. Surround yourself with intelligent, bright, energetic people. I always used to joke about it. I said, geez, if I'm the sharpest guy in the room, we're really in trouble. But if you can surround yourself with those people with the high intellect and the high energy, again, the walls start bouncing, right? And that's, again, another point. And hopefully I've used the word fun quite a lot. The best teams I've worked in, and the people on the other side of the table will tell you the same thing, I think, is, well, we've had fun doing it. So I look for those intelligent, articulate, energetic people. And I think when you get in a room with that, time flies, right? Because you're having fun doing it.
Thanks, Jim.